This is Russ with Wing Sabre Historical Fencing.
Hi, Russ with Wing Sabre Historical Fencing. I'm Kat. Hi.
So, we had a couple questions come in.
So, somebody wanted to know. Sorry.
This is called recording before coffee. I promise I'm taking her to Starbucks just as soon as we're done.
Something about messers and Dussacks and how they're related to sabers.
Okay. So the question that came in the community post feed was, how did the messer and the Dussack evolve into the saber? The answer is it didn't, because tools don't evolve like that. Sorry. It's actually more complicated than that. Messer just means long knife, and we have very specific guild-related reasons why many of them didn't get called swords. But like the saber, they tended to have a long single edge, and a number of them had a short edge back here. True edge, false edge. Some of them were curved and were kind of like sabers. Some of them were straight and were sort of like what got called peasant knives, because sometimes you needed a big heavy knife for butchering and hunting and stuff. And it was a sidearm, and you carried it, so you may as well know how to use it. And the Ponzi people who were like, I know, let's learn how to use these peasant weapons for fun. That's totally a way of getting variety into our sword play so we're not bored. Kind of like the burghers playing with heavy threshing flails. When the hell in the middle of late medieval Mainz did you see anyone carrying around a heavy threshing flail? That was there for shits and giggles and variety. Same thing with a Bauer. So, some guys said, hey, we can use this same method, true edge, false edge play, with Dussack. Makes sense. They're both single-edged weapons with a short edge and a long edge. Just like that flash in the pan Johnny-come-lately longsword. It's true. Longsword was in vogue for like 180 years. And most of the end of that part being pretty much for sport. Now, Dussack is more complicated. Dussack is the German transliteration of Tessack or Tassack, which means chopper or lopper. You know what sabia means? From which saber is derived? Ignore. Lots of YouTube talking heads will tell you that the saber comes from the Ottomans in the 14th century. No. Sabers have been around since the 8th, 9th century. Saber comes from sabia. The ya, L-Y-A, on the end of that in Hungarian means tool designed to do this. And you know what sabni means? Chop, lop, slash. Tassack and sabia are the exact same word in different languages. They mean precisely the same thing. It's that thing you chop and lop with, or slash with. It's the medieval version of hanger, weapon that hangs off your belt. Now, some of you may be saying out there, but Russ, Dussacks look different than sabia do. They're really short and they're made of leather and they come from flax knives. No. I've been dying on this hill for 20 some years. Lord, 27 years now? I'm gonna keep dying on that hill. No. Leather Dussack are the equivalent, the exact equivalent of a synthetic training saber. Sometimes they keep the little nagel here because people are used to doing messer play, and having a little bit of extra hand protection to the side is a great idea. And sometimes they're the exact same saber blades that we see on 15th century and 16th century. Big cavalry sabers, big curved blades, sometimes wide, really curved blades, with false edges and big pronounced yeomen and basket hilts, often with a Hungarian cat's head pommel, sometimes with a Venetian S-cross. You know why? Because you have a blade, and either you intend to use it on horseback, in which case you have a relatively smaller handguard, because you only need a little bit of protection, or you intend to be using it on the coastlines and possibly in maritime warfare and for city defense, in which case that big hand protection struck the people on the Adriatic and Dalmatian coasts as a great freaking idea. and it became popular. And just like today, we say, let's go get the car, and we don't say sedan. We don't say little white sedan like Tesla sells all the time. Oh, look, there's another one of those little white sedans. They didn't get that specific here and there. If they spoke a Slavic language, they said Dussack. If you were a German-speaking person living in a stunningly diverse area surrounded by Hungarian and Slavic speakers, you said Dussack, because that's how the word got transliterated into Swabian and then into Saxon. And if you're then going to say, no, this still can't be true, because Dussack are kind of short. Have we ever seen an infantry saber that's a lot shorter than a regular saber? Yes. No one's going to walk around saying that a French briquet isn't a saber, because that would be moronic. Same thing here. The weapon adjusts over time. If you're not familiar with East Central European history, understand that the Bulgars rubbed shoulders with the Hungarians since the 9th century, at minimum. They fought each other and they fought alongside each other, depending on whether the Byzantines were the paymasters or the Byzantines were the targets. The Bohemians, same thing. All the people of the Balkans, same thing, which is why we have sword-hilted sabers and saber-hilted swords, and you get into the whole, is it a saber? Is it a palash? Is it a paramirian? Is it a Dussack? So you want medieval saber? Yeah, we don't have medieval saber texts. You want Renaissance saber texts? Yeah, we have the Kunsteffekt traditions that show it. And if you look at some of the subtle art that distinguishes Lebkuchner, for example, from Dürer, you can see some mild variations that suggest that Dürer might have been thinking of the Messer more like a saber and less like a peasant knife. It's fairly subtle stuff in the mechanics, and I would have to go into deep detail to make it academically defensible. But there are things in terms of how the figures are drawn that suggest it. And that's not a shock, because Dürer's family was from Hungary. They were German speakers. You know, the Dürer from Ajtos. Where's Ajtos? Definitely not France, right? That's definitely not a French name. Yeah, they had to run like hell because of the Ottoman Wars. So, history's a little more complex than it seems, but if you get wrapped around the axle on the terminology, you're going to miss some basic stuff. One of which is, if you're training in a Renaissance era hall, and you need to train something that will do double duty for a messer, for a single-edged sword, for a straight sword, for a saber, your saber may have a basket hilt. Your saber may not. You may have a Kriegsmesser. You need something that's going to play in that space between arming sword, long sword, and curved weapon. Guess what? The messer did not evolve into the Dussack. Messer training became unfashionable and was presented with the Dussack. That's why you see some very similar techniques between some of the I'm going to parry this and then hook your wrist with my hilt stuff. But it's the same weapon. Curved messer are a form of saber with interesting hilt furniture. Dussack are sabers and saber are Dussack, depending on how you count the furniture. And now in the modern era, to distinguish it, we go, oh look, big heavy hand protection. Guys on horseback not using that. You see it a lot less in Hungary, unless you're dealing with people who are on foot, like the gabs and gobs of mercenaries fighting in heavy equipment in Hungary during the Ottoman Wars, and they tended to bring their basket-hilted sabers with them. Now, that's a dollar answer to a dime question. What's better, a messer, a Dussack, or a saber?
Yes.
Yes, that's the answer. And you know Kat's going to give her that answer because her nickname for fencing is all the things. She wants to fence with all the things. All right, so we've bored you long enough and I've ranted long enough. So let's wave goodbye and then go get Starbucks because we need it.
We've got more videos and content coming, so if you liked what you saw and it was useful for you, please stab the like button, /subscribe, and punch the little bell icon so that you're notified immediately when new content comes available. Thanks, and go do the thing.